The videos you guys are seeing on screen right now are actually videos that I shot a long time ago. If you guys didn't know already, I was a videographer before I got into photography. It's actually how I taught myself how to do lighting, and I've had a camera since about 2016. I just never really did anything other than little gym edits that you guys are seeing on screen right now. But as of recently, I've been trying to get into videography again, and the people over at FeiyuTech were kind enough to send me over a gimbal for me to try out. And they sent me over this bad boy right here, which is the FeiyuTech G6 Max gimbal. And in today's video, I'm gonna be going over my little review on it. I didn't have the chance to use it as much as I would like to, just because my schedule's been really busy and I've been basically just completely focused on photography right now. But in the future, I do plan on revisiting this gimbal and possibly even getting a more expensive gimbal and giving it a full go. But for right now, I'm going to just talk about my short experience with the gimbal so you guys have an understanding of what this gimbal is capable of. So before we get into the review, I want to go ahead and say that I was not paid for this video. FeiyuTech did not pay me. They just simply reached out, asked if I wanted to try out their gimbal. I said yeah. They sent it over to me and I got to play around with it for a little bit. I'm not getting paid, so I have absolutely no incentive to lie about its performance, which I won't. Now, this gimbal is obviously a travel size gimbal. I don't know if you guys saw it. It's not that big. It's a really small gimbal relative to other gimbals. Now, I was using my Sony a6400 with this gimbal, and I originally was trying to use it with the 16mm Sigma, but I just could not get it to balance, which was unfortunate because I really like the Sigma, which is what I'm using to film right now. However, I was not able to balance it, which was a little unfortunate. So all the footage I'm going to be showing that I shot with this gimbal, I had to use my kit lens that came with my Sony a6400, which is a lot less quality, but you know, at the end of the day, I had to make it balance somehow. I'm sure if I had some counterweights, I could have easily got it, but I didn't have any counterweights on me, so wasn't able to balance it. It's not because the weight was too much, it's just because the way that the weight's distributed was a little weird. The a6400 is pretty light by itself, and with the Sigma lens attached, it just was way too front heavy for me to be able to balance it, and you will need some counterweights if you do have that combo. So let's talk about performance of this thing. Like I said, I didn't have too much time to use it, but in the short amount of time that I used it, I was pleasantly surprised. It did what it was supposed to do, which was stabilize my footage. Now, if you guys have ever used a gimbal, you know that gimbals are pretty finicky when you're first setting them up, but once you get them going, they're pretty easy and pretty nice to use. The hardest part about using a gimbal is always setting it up because it's super annoying. You have to level it, you have to get everything balanced out as perfectly as you can, and then you can finally start shooting. So if you're trying to do run and gun situations, I wouldn't even consider using a gimbal. But if you are doing a little bit of a bigger project and you need a gimbal, I'm sure the inconvenience of having to balance it out in the beginning is gonna definitely be worth it once you get the really smooth and buttery footage. With this gimbal in particular though, I did have a problem when I balanced it. The motors just kind of started freaking out on me, and they did like this weird super strong vibration thing. And it was for a couple of seconds and then it just like never happened again. So I don't know if it was just because I didn't lock one of the motors or something, but it was really weird. And you know, that's something that I should definitely mention, is that I definitely balanced it perfectly, and when I started moving it around, it didn't immediately start shaking, but then it just kind of had like a weird little spasm and shook like really violently for like 10 seconds, and then it just kind of went away for the rest of the day. So that was really weird, but other than that, I didn't really have any problems with the gimbal in terms of its actual performance. So apart from those two things that are pretty prone to a lot of gimbals, let me talk about how it felt actually using this thing. So because it's so small, I was able to use it and not get weighed down whatsoever. It's only added about like 2 pounds or however much it weighs to my camera system, so it didn't even really feel like I was carrying a gimbal. That's one thing to keep in mind with gimbals, is that it is going to add a little bit of weight to your entire setup, and that extra weight might tire you out a lot faster. But with this gimbal, I didn't see myself getting tired anytime soon. It was about the same amount of stress on my hands and arms as it was without the gimbal, just because it's such a lightweight gimbal, which is good because it keeps you in the moment and keeps you focused more on what you're shooting rather than what you're actually holding in your arms. So I did a couple of shots with it that were pretty basic, and how well it actually stabilized the footage, and I didn't run any tests without stabilization because I didn't want to turn off the gimbal, take off the camera, and run the test and then do it again with the gimbal. I just kind of did one pass take and am showing you guys what the results of that were. So this is not a super scientific or conclusive video, but it is showing you guys exactly how the gimbal actually works. I'm not the biggest fan of using those crazy gimbal modes that are like, you know, the Inception mode or like all these other modes. I basically just kept it on whatever default setting it was. So I don't think I can get my input on the gimbal's features too much. But again, this is kind of coming from someone who doesn't do video too much. So if you are someone that's trying to get into video, I feel like this would be a pretty good comparison, because I'm sure a lot of you aren't going to be using all the crazy features and the crazy gimbal motion patterns that this thing has. So as you guys see in the footage that I'm showing you guys with the gimbal stabilizes the footage pretty well. There are some shots that are obviously still pretty noticeably shaky, and that's because gimbals don't completely stabilize your footage. You still have to walk in a very precise way in order for your footage to be as stable as possible, and they only really stabilize it to a certain extent. So if you're like sprinting or running, it will stabilize the footage, but there's still going to be some shake to it. So that's something you have to keep in mind, and it's not limited to this gimbal. It's basically with all gimbals, there is always going to be a little bit of shake. The motors and the gimbal itself can only do so much. You'll probably have to do some stabilization in post as well as the stabilization with the gimbal if you want to get super duper buttery smooth footage. Now for me, I think that the footage that I got was good enough, and honestly, like I said, I personally don't even see myself using gimbal for a lot of things because I don't like to be weighed down. I don't like how gimbals add an extra step between you and the creative process. I don't have any complaints with the gimbal. I think the gimbal's fine. I think that at the end of the day, it's just a gimbal, and like any other gimbal, it's prone to problems that all gimbals have, like battery issues. You know, this gimbal doesn't have a detachable battery, so if it runs out on you, you're out of luck. You're gonna have to wait for it to charge up, which is gonna add more downtime, and it's gonna make your filming less efficient. It does have really cool features like you can connect your camera to it, and there's a knob that you can change different things on your camera lens. I don't know, I don't really spend the time to actually use it just because I don't feel like gimbals are that big of a thing for me. Who is this gimbal really for? It's a medium range gimbal. It's good for people that want to get into the gimbal world and don't have something like a cine camera. If you have a cine camera, forget about it. This thing is not strong enough to support that, nor is it reliable enough to even mount your $10,000+ camera on. I would say this is good for someone who is like a hobbyist and has like a Sony a6400 or like a Fuji X-T3, X-T4, something along those lines. Small mirrorless cameras, I think this gimbal is perfect for, because one, you can throw it in your bag and take it with you whenever you want, wherever you want. It's not going to weigh you down. Two, it's not that expensive, so if you end up not liking it, you know, you didn't waste a ton of money, and you can probably just give it as a gift to someone who does want one. And three, it does the job that it has to when it works. Gimbals, again, are pretty unreliable sometimes because although it does run off batteries and it has powered motors and everything, you still need to get an initial balance. And if you can't do that, well, then you can't really use a gimbal, and you carry that gimbal all the way out to wherever you were for nothing. So gimbals are something that I think, you know, need to have a specific task for. If you already have what you want to shoot planned in mind, then you can plan with a gimbal. But if you're out and about, you know, honestly, it's probably just better for you to record handheld, have slightly shaky footage, but get the shot that you want, than stop what you're doing, try to balance the gimbal, and then end up missing the shot because you were too busy balancing it. So I think this gimbal is perfect for people who want to get into gimbal work but don't want to spend a ton of money and aren't professionals. This gimbal can work with iPhones, small GoPros, and cameras up to, you know, Sony a6400, small mirrorless cameras, and anything in between. So if you own any device that records video and it's within that form factor, this probably works on that. But there are also gimbals that are cheaper that work specifically for smartphones, so I wouldn't advise you going out and buying this gimbal if you're just going to use it with your smartphone. There are better gimbals for that, and it'll save you money, and in the long run, it'll probably be more beneficial. But if you plan on switching your iPhone and your camera, then this is probably the gimbal for you because you can run both on it. My closing thoughts on this gimbal are that it's a good gimbal, it's good for the price, it does what it needs to, but at the end of the day, it's just a gimbal. It's not something that's magical. It's not something that's going to completely transform your footage. If you found this video useful, or if you have any questions, go ahead and comment in the comment section below. If you don't already follow me on social media, make sure you follow me at Moody Darkroom. That's across all social medias. That's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Visco, Tumblr, anything you can think of, I'm on it, and I have that username. So go ahead and follow me over there if you guys like keeping up with my photography, and I will be releasing more videos soon. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. See ya.